Hi there. I'm thinking about how the Synoptic Gospels, Matthew, Mark and Luke, came about, and my current thoughts are that we should think about 5 sources, and I've made this little acronym, BCOSS, BCOSS. B for backbone, C for complement, O for oral traditions, oral stories, S for scripture, and another S for small writings. The B for backbone, I think this is what we find in Mark and what we also find in Matthew and Luke. There seems to be a chronological backbone that is used by all 3 authors. It's called the triple tradition, or it's pretty much synonymous with it. The second thing is the complement. This is what scholars are calling Q. This is material found in Matthew and Luke, but not in Mark. And then you got the O for oral. I think that we can't forget that these early believers were telling the stories to one another, and this provoked the writing down of them. And there would have been a lot of stories that were told, which were then remembered after they had written down certain stories that, oh, you forgot to include this one. So we can't forget that there are other stories, a wealth of oral traditions that could be drawn upon by the writers. And I think the writer of Matthew and Luke also made good use of these oral traditions. S for scripture. Old Testament scripture was very important in the writing of the Synoptics for quotes, and often the Greek Septuagint is followed word for word in the Greek Synoptics that we're talking about. And the other S for small writings, there probably were small written accounts of, say, songs and prophecies, new songs and prophecies that are recorded in Luke, and sermons in Acts. These things were probably written down word for word, that Luke or other gospel writers could think that they could reproduce that. It probably had to be written first off, because it was that kind of material involving sequences of words that needed to be reproduced. So there we have it. These are the 5 things. BCOSS, because this is my explanation. The backbone, I reckon it's actually the Hebrew gospel, the original Hebrew gospel that Papias said Apostle Matthew wrote. I reckon that Mark is more or less a straight translation of it into Greek, and that it was the Hebrew gospel was actually being translated afresh by Matthew and Luke and incorporated with other materials being incorporated. The second source of written material, the C or complement, is what the scholars call Q. I reckon this may well be what Papias said Mark wrote down. He was, Papias says, the interpreter of Peter, writing down what Peter wrote, what Peter was actually proclaiming to his hearers. It says hearers. So it's not as though Peter wrote down something and then Mark translated it. It's rather that Peter was preaching to his hearers different sermons, and then Mark was also writing down, translating into probably Greek. Imagining a Greek record. I think this is what the scholars are calling Q. A list of sayings in no particular order. Papias says it was not ordered. So this fits the description, I would say, for a work something like the Gospel of Thomas, a list of sayings in no particular order that could be combined with the Hebrew Gospel to make a new Greek Gospel. So I think Matthew and Luke combined these 2 sources. Then we've got the scripture. We've got, for scripture source, we've got the Hebrew Bible and also its Greek translation. And for the small other writings, we can't rule out that there were other small documents that could have been used by Matthew and Luke. And so these double S's probably, and the O, are probably the source of the special M and the special L material that appears only in one gospel.